All right.
All right.
This is the Domestic Draft Podcast.
Man.
I'm Evan Bierman here with Dan Slowick. We got a special guest coming on today. We're going to do a deep dive into this Cubs roster and expectations for the upcoming season. But Dan, first, let's kick it off. What are you drinking over there? See you pouring something up.
Yeah, it's a brewery out in Oceanside in San Diego. So that's a little north than downtown. It's a cool little area. I love Oceanside, but it's called Black Plague Brewing. And let me tell you about Black Plague. It's been blowing up lately. They were established in 2017, and their kind of mission statement is that they are determined to find a way or make one. The idea of Black Plague was founded to create a community of relationships and great beer. Black Plague began as an abstract idea about bringing people together over delicious beer, but it quickly became more than that. The doors opened, like I said, in 2017, and they've won multiple awards since. And after doing some research on them, they have really close ties to the world of skateboarding. They brewed a beer together with Tony Hawk, who resides up in Oceanside. Tony Hops was the name of it. And the beer that I'm drinking today is called the Nyjah, and it's based off a collaboration with Nyjah Houston, who was a skateboarding prodigy. And this beer that I'm drinking, it's a 3.9 on Untapped, 7%. And it's a hazy IPA. It's dry hopped with massive additions of Nelson, Simcoe, and Cryo hops, creating extreme tropical aromas with passion fruit, peach, stone fruit, gooseberries, intense flavors of papaya, ripe apricot, and traces of melon. And it's inspired by Nyjah's laser focus on perfecting his skating. And it's matched by our dedication to crafting this incredibly delicious beer. Quite a story. I have yet to go check it out, but after just finding this at the store, I'm definitely intrigued to go see them. What about you? What do you got?
3.9 also, not bad. So the brewery I've got today is Wild Onion Brewery. It's out in Lake Barrington, actually. It's established in 1997. Wild Onion Brewery is located about 45 miles northwest of downtown Chicago. They're both a production brewery and full-service brew pub. It's also known as the Onion Pub. If you're out from the northwest suburbs, you probably heard of Wild Onion Brewery. It's kind of a big name out there. It's been out there for a while. They also have a banquet hall. It's built on a 20-acre site. They have a fully restored native prairie and 11-acre lake, so it's a pretty big area out there. The beer I have here is called Nordic Misfit. It's a juicy IPA. It's got like notes of pineapple in there. 6.5%, gets a 3.79 on Untapped. Wild Onion beers are distributed throughout Chicagoland, along with 5 other states in the Midwest. And speaking of Chicagoland and, being around our sports teams, we got Michael Cerami coming on to join us today. Michael Cerami covers the Cubs, Bears, and Bulls at Bleacher Nation. You can find him on Twitter at Michael_Cerami. Michael, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I feel like I should have done a little bit more beer research, but I got.
What do you got?
I got a.
There you go, crack
IPA. Yeah, I try to get that nice and close to the microphone. It's Half Acre, which I know is a Chicago brewery, and it's an IPA called Bodum. I didn't actually buy. I do have a good story, even though it's not about the history of this.
Let's
beer.
hear it.
I didn't buy this beer for myself. My friends bought this beer for me because in October I got in like a pretty wicked bike accident. I was riding my bike to the local gym, and like a car came pretty close to me, and my chain popped off, and I like flew over the front of my handlebars, broke my finger, almost had a borderline concussion. Not really. Anyway, my friend sent me a nice care package of beers, and this was one of them that I still had in the fridge, and I went, can't grab a Miller Lite for a show like this, so I'm gonna go with something good.
There you go. What a story.
Yeah. Man, glad to see you're okay.
I mean, now I'm fine.
Yeah, Half Acre is great. I think we've all been there at least once. So let's get going. I see you all over Twitter, especially during Cub season and off season. And I'm curious, how did you get started as a career writing for Bleacher Nation and all of that? How did you get into baseball and, starting your career path that way?
Sure. So it definitely wasn't a plan of mine. I went to college went to U of I. I was an econ and poli-sci major, so no real plan. Became a consultant for a company downtown in the city, but because that job was 100% travel, I was on the road Monday through Thursday every week. Like there was no sometimes in the office. That was the schedule. I had been a Bleacher Nation fan for almost the entire time it existed, just by chance. Never knew Brett or anything. Was just always a big Cubs fan. Found the site. one day when I was working, Brett posted a help wanted sign for a part-time writer for weekday nights. Well, I was coming home every weekday night to an empty hotel room with nothing to do, watching all the Cubs games I could anyway. So I applied. I had been doing some like writing, but on a movie site that I had created just for myself. It was kind of just fun, keeping track of the movies I watched, writing about them when I wanted to, keeping track of what I was going to watch. And I used some of that stuff to sort of, prove that at least I have some interest in writing. Like it's not just completely out of nowhere. Talked to Brett a few times, wrote a couple like test articles and got hired as the part-time writer. And I did that for the entire 2015 season. So I still kept my full-time job and was writing for Bleacher Nation at nights.
Good timing.
Yeah, it worked out well because at the end of that year, I sort of put Brett's feet to the fire a little bit. We had talked about me coming full-time, but I didn't want to start a new project with my consulting company and then leave sometime in the middle of that project. So I sort of was like, hey, Brett, if we're going to do this, let's do it right now. January 1st, I quit my job and started with Bleacher Nation full time. And
Awesome.
That's been it since.
Wow. I'm curious of your website with movies. So I have to ask your top movie. What is it of all time?
Oh, wow. So I think the movie I always say to this, the movie I always answer with this question is Inglourious Bastards, which is, that might sound a little basic, but I really love Quentin Tarantino, but I love that movie too. That movie to me, it sort of illustrates what I always think of as the perfect. Whenever I talk about movies, I love that we're talking about this. I always talk about movies on this like XY axis, and I feel like not enough people do. One of the axes is the quality of the movie on like an objective scale. Let's say if it was good or bad, and then the north-south axis is how much you liked it. So you can really like a bad movie or really hate a really good movie, but you can still acknowledge that it's good. So for me, some of the things that I think about liking in a movie, Inglourious Bastards captures so much. It's got a lot of like great suspense, but also comedy. It feels like a big blockbuster movie, and I'm all for the like cinematic experience of movie theater stuff. Like that's kind of what draws people to superhero movies, right? So those are easy to like, but without all the quality. I think Inglourious Bastards kind of bridges that gap of this is an extremely fun movie to watch, but it's also clearly well written and well executed. And that's why that movie always sort of hits the sweet spot for me in terms of just being my favorite overall movie. But,
it's a good answer. Love that movie.
Yeah. Fantastic movie. I thought he was going to say Fast and the Furious 6.
Yeah.
So another thing that I noticed, I didn't get a chance to watch Outside the Ivy when it was on, but I'm curious to hear this experience. How did you get into that role? This was a couple years back, right? And were there any surreal experiences when you were working on set for NBC Sports Chicago?
Yeah, so that was actually a pretty interesting one. Here's an exclusive for you. We never told anybody this story. The way this sort of started was we were originally approached about this being a Bleacher Nation show. We were going to do a show like Bleacher Nation, not sponsored, like created by, like it was going to be Brett and I, and possibly Luis, who's our Bears writer. And then that sort of fizzled out, and they had been doing this other show called Bulls Insiders. And they wanted to do something similar with the Cubs. And so I was sort of coming along in this process with them. And then, I have a lot of great experiences, a lot of people there, and I don't want to sound like a jerk, but this started out as like something that we were going to be given. And then eventually I had to like actually audition for this show that at one point we were like kind of, I don't know, you get the idea.
Yes.
I thought I was going to be more directly involved, and it turns out they were just, considering us as talent, and that was it, which is fine. That's their, company, their show. So long story short, we all auditioned for this show, and I actually didn't get the part to host the show that originally was going to be one of our shows. Yeah. So that was a bummer. And it was going to be Luis, Danny, and this man, I can't think of her name. There was another Cubs fan from Twitter that was popular, and she was originally cast, but she is also in the musical scene, like downtown Chicago, Broadway, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And right before the show was going to start, she got some part or role or something. I never asked about the details. So they were out there redoing this search, having not contacted me. And I actually picked up the phone and called the director of the NBC Sports Chicago studio and like went on this like 20-minute rant about why I was like, listen, I'm ready to do this. I know, I don't know what you guys were looking for. They explained to me what was wrong. I'll tell you in a second, but I was like, I want to do this. So can I just be the one that does it? And they were like, yeah, okay, come on in. And I came in.
That's awesome.
And he sat me down though. And this is the problem. He goes, we think you're great. And we obviously wanted to do it with you before. But when I came in for my audition, I was talking too much about analytics and advanced analytics. And they're like, no one cares. Like that doesn't translate to TV, which again, they're the TV experts. That's not my, field. So I was like, okay, so talk dumber. Like,
right.
I was like, what do you mean? These are correct. And if we're even being more honest, this was 2018, I guess. The stuff that I was talking about has just become even more intertwined with the sport, even on their general national broadcast. So I think maybe it was just a little too early to be talking about weighted runs created plus and, whatever else, spin access and stuff like that. Maybe that's all it was. But I got it afterwards and I had a ton of fun doing it. I mean, one of the times like Ozzie Guillen showed up during our show, he just broke onto the set and made fun of us for losing to the White Sox. I accidentally broke into David Kaplan doing his post game, show, and to tell them that, who did the Cubs trade for? Now I can't remember the story. The Cubs had traded for catcher Martin Maldonado or something. And I like went in there to tell them the story. They were on the air and I made like a huge ruckus and all the sound people looked at me like I was just a rookie and didn't know what I was doing, which was true. And so that was fun, but it was a great experience and everybody that works there is awesome. And, I am glad I got to do it in the end, even if it was a roundabout way to get there.
Wow. Yeah, that's super cool.
That's interesting. I was watching the spring training broadcast a few days ago and they had like a guy on there talking about like the analytics of accuracy for pitching. And like, yeah, he's going to be coming on more and more. And we're going to have this guy who's basically his job is to come on the broadcast and talk analytics. So I think you might've just been a little bit before the times,
Yeah. I was actually watching that guy and I was like cracking up. I was like, man, this is just like the biggest nerd, and watching him in the most, I mean that, in the most complimentary way possible. Right. I love baseball nerds. That's the whole game for us. Right.
Yeah.
I was like, I cannot believe they put this nerd on TV. Like, this is awesome. Like, I really loved it. The way that not only the topics that he got into and missing by certain baseballs and
right,
but also why and how the Cubs use that data specifically, which is even more interesting because we can learn a lot about like certain advanced analytics by reading Fangraphs or whatever other posts that we come across. And that's great, but we don't always know how our favorite team how much they actually care about those stats or use them, how they translate them to players, which tends to be a whole different process than what they actually do in the front office rooms, and stuff like that. So I thought his introduction and inclusion on those broadcasts was excellent. It was really cool.
Which brings me to Moneyball, which is one of the greatest movies of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great one. Absolutely.
That's what makes
like
me
the sport movie all day here on this episode. Yeah.
All right. So coming back to, your career now with Bleacher Nation, like, obviously we had this long lockout period. What's it like being a sports writer for a sport that's in a lockout?
Sure. So
it's great.
Another thing that, we don't publicize too much, not for any reason. It's just, it doesn't come up, I don't get asked about my career often. One of the reasons I was brought on first for Bleacher Nation full-time, I was the first full-time employee besides Brett, who owns it and created it, was because of my background in the business world. And the idea, although the first few years was spent almost exclusively writing, the idea was eventually to have me move into more of an operations role in concert with writing, but just less in editing. So a lot of the things I do now, from like, hiring, training, I added all the posts at BM Bulls, BM Bears, BM Blackhawks, and I write, for the Cubs. So during this lockout, that job was harder, or more boring, or more difficult in unique ways for Brett, who was exclusively covering the Cubs, and then he does a lot of work behind the scenes too, compared to me, who still had a lot of Bulls stuff, Blackhawk stuff, and Bears stuff to coordinate, edit. We hired a new employee, Patrick. Part of that was training him and teaching him how we do things at Bleach for Nation. So my time was still pretty filled up, just with significantly less baseball, which is, a bummer. But I was still pretty busy because of that. And then, when the season comes back around and baseball's back, I will be, like always, writing a lot more. But the time off is usually spent on other parts of the business, which is exactly what I signed up for, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. And baseball's back, just like one of my favorite movies, Back to the Future. And the Cubs made a nice big signing. Seiya Suzuki.
Huge move.
I feel like as though, since it was like a lockout and that was one of their first signings, it didn't get a lot, like, in my opinion, didn't get like this huge coverage of like this big signing for this franchise that's a major market franchise.
Maybe not in San Diego out there, Dan, but I feel like in Chicago it was a pretty big deal.
So it might be like the outside looking in, right?
Which is a problem on its
everyone's
own.
talking about the Dodgers out here. It's always Dodgers this, Dodgers that. But what do you think about this signing? You're very much into the analytics as well. How does he project? Where is he going to bat in the order? What kind of production could we expect from him? Is he going to be? Where is he? Yeah, is he going to be a
first of all, 5 years, $85 million deal, largest deal given to a Japanese position player in history, and the 5th largest contract ever handed out by the Cubs. So I feel like that context needs to be said before we even start talking about him, because it's just a huge deal for them to give out to Seiya. So
would love to talk all about this. So that last point you just made is a huge one. And the same kind of goes for Marcus Stroman. There's a lot of understandable grief about Cubs spending over the last few years, but this offseason, whether or not they spent enough, which I would say maybe they did not. I was a big proponent of going after Carlos Correa. They have spent a ton, and the deal for Seiya and the deal for Stroman, those are big contracts in the history of the Chicago Cubs franchise. Whether we want to pretend like all those $200 and $300 million deals that were going around all the league, those weren't Cubs deals, any of them. Jason Hayward has the biggest Cubs deal, and it's still going on for 2 more years. So it's like, those are significant moves relative to our own history. And in terms of there not being a ton of coverage, I actually kind of do understand. I mean, a big thing that we were complaining about was that his introductory press conference wasn't live streamed, even though they seemingly had the ability. We had a post up with the live stream running on YouTube. It wasn't on Marquee, which is beyond understanding, because why do you have a network if you're not going to? That's got to be easily one of the highest, most easily marketable moments that's not game coverage that you can ever have, is a signing of a new major free agent, and they didn't have it. Whatever. It wasn't streaming on their website, and for like a split second it was streaming live from their YouTube channel, and then it shut down and was marked private until like Saving Private Ryan, the famous Tom Hanks movie.
We'll keep it going.
And then afterwards, it was available. But I don't know why they did that, but for not only promoting the Cubs in this big signing here locally in Chicago, or even domestically in the United States, he's a huge famous player in Japan. This is the kind of thing that the Cubs should have found as an easy win. They have so much marketability that they don't take advantage of in ways that fans actually do want. That's something we would love to. We want more of that. You know what I mean? That's the kind of thing. So that was a little disappointing. But I am very excited for him. There's in terms of his production, boy, it's really hard. Guys like he is widely considered one of the best Japanese bats to come over to the States in the last decade. And he was paid accordingly. Obviously, there are some articles you could read on Fangraphs actually about his expected production, which I almost get nervous sharing, because the picture is pretty rosy. I mean, he seems like he can be a very good hitter. The big problem with most players coming over from the NPB is their ability to catch up to American MLB level fastballs. I shouldn't say American, just MLB, stateside baseball fastballs. Because the average fastball in the United States is 2 or 3 miles an hour faster than the highest levels in Japan, Korea. And, that's something that I'm not comfortable projecting until we see him in action. I don't know if it's going to be something he's going to never develop in time, or be able to attack right away. But if he is able to catch up to that, this is the sort of player that can be a perennial middle of the order, all-star capable bat, depending on whether or not his defense in right field is as good as advertised, which is not, Jason Hayward in his prime levels, but he's supposed to be an above average right fielder, good, but not accurate arm. And overall though, at 27, you have to imagine the 5 years that the Cubs have him are going to be a good 5 years. He's a slugger. He hits for power. He will take his walks. Overall, it's a really, really good addition. And I hope and suspect he will be around the next time the Cubs are in the playoffs, which probably not this year, but within the next few seasons, especially with expanded postseason format, he's going to be a critical signing. And I'm actually pretty happy the Cubs got him this year, because maybe we can learn a lot about what he's going to be and what we're going to need if he's not reaching the level of offensive ability that we otherwise suspect.
Yeah. And I mean, just going back to, the signing and the press conference and stuff. I think back to when we signed John Lester and like how big of a deal that was, this should have been right there. You know what I mean? And yeah, it wasn't. You're right. I mean, in Chicago, like we knew about it, but
I feel like it has a lot to do with the current state of the team. Because when we signed John Lester, we were on an upswing. We had all this talent in the pipeline, and that was kind of like opening the door wide open. Like, all right, this is our window of opportunity. Let's just go for it. Right now, like Cubs fans don't know where this team is. Like, where are we at right now? We're projected to be like fourth in our division. We're signing big time players, but then the rest of the roster is kind of fill-ins, and we're signing 1-year deals and some holdover contracts. So I think that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and it's John Lester's signing, Joe Maddon's arrival had more fanfare, than this major player that Cubs signed. There is a lot of uncertainty out there, and it affects me. I mean, I don't think of myself at all as a baseball reporter or journalist. We are fans and we like to cover the team, and we just like to try our best to be, the smartest fan in the room type of thing, and sharing the perspective of how we're reacting to these deals and trying to provide context. And the best I can do is that the Cubs, as much as we may disagree with this approach, are at best trying to give themselves a 10 to 15% shot at competing. And if in the first half everybody's hitting their 90 percentile outcome and the Cubs are looking like a team that could make the playoffs, well, then maybe Jed either keeps the team together or even goes out and adds a player at the deadline. But if it's even a little bit of a question, then they're just going to blow it up again. And that's where a lot of these signings, especially the ones in the bullpen, are going to have the most value to the Cubs, not in their potential on-field performance, but in their ability to be highly valuable and easily tradable assets at the deadline. And, we saw that in 2013 and 2014, and it worked out for the Cubs. This isn't supposed to be a full rebuild, but I also don't think that, the Cubs were out there signing Seiyas and Stromans and Yan Gomes types, players in 2012 and 2013. They weren't. So it should be a little bit better, but that doesn't change the fact that it could easily be a 70-win team if they blow it up halfway through the season.
What I also liked about the Seiya signing, and this comes back to Dan and I's little rivalry here on different areas of the country, is that he had a workout in San Diego, right? And then he goes out to dinner with Yu Darvish, the San Diego Padre. And right. I don't know what was said at that dinner, but then he comes and he visits Wrigley and he says, "This is it. I want to be here." Right. I mean, I'm sure there's some details that I'm leaving out there, but from my perspective, I'm like, hey, Dan, Chicago, you moved out to San Diego. He's coming back here. Love to
Yeah,
see it.
absolutely.
It's a great baseball town. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, so one of the San Diego is where my last job was when I was a consultant still. So that's where I was when I quit my job. But Darvish told reportedly, told Seiya that Chicago is great and the Cubs were a very accommodating organization for family. And, I know firsthand, and this is actually purely coincidence, the Cubs do a lot for the families of the players they sign, and that the players they are trying to lure into Chicago, they make video packages for the families too. There's like dedicated daycares that the Cubs run for the kids of the players that are on the team. And even more so for Seiya, a big factor in him signing was that before the lockout, the Cubs played their cards right. Seiya had said that a lot of teams were trying to sign him and get him to sign before the lockout began, pressuring him to get a deal done. The Cubs sensed that he wasn't interested in signing before the lockout. So their video chat and video package they prepared for him before the lockout didn't include any pressure to sign a deal ahead of time. Instead, it was a overarching message about what they wanted to tell him about when the time was right after the lockout, and just a personal message from Jed that said not to forget about the Cubs when it came time to sign. So I thought that was really, really nice touch by Jed Hoyer. And, I want to give him credit, but also, that's probably something, the type of thing he picked up from Theo Epstein. A lot of people don't. Theo has so many different qualities that people remember him for, but his ability to sign the player he wants. I mean, he was a master recruiter. It was really, 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 really impressive when he wanted a guy and he put together those overall, productions to get someone to come to Chicago. And if Jed is going to take anything from Epstein, and it's that, I think the Cubs will be in a good place, come a year or two from now.
Absolutely. That's awesome. All right. So then the other big signing you mentioned, Marcus Stroman, looked the part in his first spring training outing. How good do you think he can be this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm been a huge Marcus Stroman fan for a while. Yeah. The big question for the Cubs is not going to come down to whether or not Marcus Stroman is good. And I'm not saying that to avoid the question. I'm gonna sort of answer it. He is another soft tossing right-hander, but the Cubs did their best to accommodate Stroman and the other pitchers in their rotation by getting Andrelton Simmons to play shortstop, at least in part-time. Nico Horner will probably play a lot of second. Patrick Wisdom, I think, is super underrated at third defensively. And then there's Jonathan Villar to move around. So I think Stroman actually may be set up for even more success in Chicago based on the defense that'll have around him most of the time. He's an extreme ground ball pitcher, extreme pitch to contact guy. I do think, though, that sort of style will lend itself to less obvious measures of success because he won't be the big strikeout guy. That's not going to be something that we see easy early on. I think early in the season when it's colder out, there could be some factors there in terms of the defense and their ability to convert some of the balls in play to outs. Stuff like that. And, if I've learned one thing about Chicago baseball fans, and I'm not excluding myself from this as much as I would try, it's that we are so keyed into first impressions. It's horrible how much that matters to us. I mean, as much as I love Nico Horner and I think he's going to be awesome, he had a great debut and then was really bad for a really long time and really injured throughout that time. He was really bad. And it didn't matter, because that first experience with him was so positive that we loved him. So if Stroman comes out and holds the Brewers to 2 runs over 5+ innings that first time out and whatever, which can you believe that was my go-to example of a good outing? Now, I mean, that's how much the game has changed. I can't even believe I said that. I think Cubs fans will be like, all right, this is our guy. But I mean, either way, I'm so happy he's on the team, especially with like Javi gone. This team like needs some liveliness,
personality,
some personality.
Mojo.
It clearly has that. I mean, I love Kyle Hendricks. I loved John Lester. You know, those guys are great. And you know, Ben Zobrist, whatever, Chris Bryant, you know, they're great players and super boring players. You know, Javi Baez was fun and he made it fun to watch baseball games. And I think Marcus Stroman's going to do the same thing. So if he can, you know, get some of those balls in play to find gloves early on, I think we're going to be super happy with him throughout the extent of his contract, whether it's 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Another guy on the roster too that adds a lot of personality is Contreras. That guy plays balls to the wall, 110% every time. But there's been a lot of like uncertainty. Like, what are we doing with him? We got Almaya in the pipeline. Is he going to be moved? Is he somebody that the Cubs are going to re-sign, or are they going to try to flip him depending on where the record is come deadline?
Yeah. So this has been a topic of frustration for me all offseason. I had originally broken that the Cubs hadn't been in contact with Contreras over any contract extension talks before the lockout. The same was reported afterwards today. I had some hope for a little bit there that they were going to, you know, announce a surprise extension, because today was the day that they had to file their arbitration numbers or otherwise, you know, agree to a deal to not go to arbitration. And Contreras is one of like the last players announced. And I was like, come on, like maybe this is the time, in other words, if I'm not being clear, that teams typically save extension negotiations for. You know, we're already going to be talking, we're already going to be meeting, we're going to be talking about numbers, and next year, let's see if we can iron out an extension. Didn't happen. And they didn't come to an agreement at all for 2022. So Contreras will now head to arbitration with the Cubs. Ian Happ went to arbitration with the Cubs last year and won, which is the first time in like 3 decades or something, or whatever it was. And this year he just agreed to a deal, which is good. But Contreras, so here's the dilemma. Maybe in some alternate universe where Miguel Amaya isn't going to miss almost the entire season, you feel more comfortable trading Contreras, rolling with Gomes and whatever other backup you can have. And then Amaya comes up and you're sort of ready to roll with that duo as your 1-2, and you sort of balance it out so Amaya's not overwhelmed. But Amaya's been hurt a lot, and he hasn't played in the upper levels of the minors, and he may still someday be the future catcher of the Chicago Cubs, but he is no longer a factor in the future of Wilson Contreras. He cannot be. You cannot count on him either way, which is fine. But that leaves the Cubs in a pretty tricky spot, because Contreras is going to be looking for a contract somewhere between JT Realmuto, which is the far high end. Even his side knows that they're not going to get that. It's like 115 million. And Yasmani Grandal, which is like 73 million with the White Sox. So that's sort of the window that he's operating in. I think his camp knows that they're not going to get anything close to Realmuto. I think probably something closer to like 90 to 100 million might be like I'm not reporting that. That's just like my sense of it from what's out there would be what he's looking for. I don't think the Cubs are going to be comfortable giving him that, at least not anything that they've done over the last year or two seems to indicate that they're interested at all in giving him that sort of, you know, at market level deal. So, okay, fine. What happens then? Well, trading a catcher midseason is incredibly difficult. So much of the value that a catcher brings to a team is how he works with the pitching staff. And so much of that is neutered by bringing him in at the end of July, beginning of August, and hoping that he can get up to speed by the time the playoffs roll around. Maybe something changes if some major catcher gets hurt, but you know, it's very unlikely. And the returns for catchers midseason are often poor for that reason. So then you're looking at a preseason trade, and frankly, Brett and I have just sort of internally talked about this. If it's not done by the end of this week, if there's not a trade by the end of this week, there's not going to be a trade. And he's just going to have the same path forward as Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant and Javi Baez, which is he's going to enter the season under his final year of control. The Cubs are going to see what happens in the first half, and maybe they'll trade him at the deadline for whatever they can get. Maybe they just play out the season with him and try to work out another deal. But if they're going to keep him long-term, it's going to be a deal on the Cubs terms. And it just doesn't seem like that's going to be the right move for Contreras, who is obviously a guy that wants to win. I mean, he needs to be convinced that the Cubs are going to continue to spend and push forward and promote prospects at an aggressive pace to win as soon as, 2023. And then, who knows if they can credibly do that.
Does the addition of a universal DH change anything from, from Jed's perspective when thinking about signing a catcher? Because you're adding a hitter really, and you're taking out that hole when a pitcher comes up to bat, right? So you have an extra hitter that's coming to the lineup. Maybe you can have somebody that's not as great of a hitter
behind the plate, and it's just like controlling
as a catcher, and just somebody that can solely focus on being great defensively. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, so when it comes to Contreras and the DH, I think that, this is literally a conversation I was having today. I think Contreras has so much potential contractual upside in free agency, also plenty of downside, but and this year might be the perfect year for him to put it all together, because Yan Gomes behind the plate will take a lot of pressure off of Contreras and his, heavy workload over the last several years. And so will the availability of the DH spot. So I sort of think that that's going to play out, but like in reverse for the Cubs. The Cubs might actually get that ideal production out of their better hitting catcher who can play, DH whenever he needs. And then he's going to be entering a market that's weak on free agents in general, depending on if Bogarts and Correa and Rizzo opt out. I guess they all could. But still, it's not a very exciting free agent class, and it doesn't figure to be. And so there won't be a ton of free agents, so he'll be in a good position. He'll still be 30 years old, and he could be coming off a really good season. And there's going to be labor peace for the next 4 years at least, which matters a lot to owners. They can expect their revenues to not be interrupted. And there'll be another year and a full regular season removed from any COVID crunched budgets. So I actually do understand, like, even if the Cubs were to approach Contreras with a borderline acceptable deal, he might still be willing to bet on himself, because so many things are working in his favor this year to hit it big in free agency. I mean, we've seen it play out wrong a million times, but we've also seen it play out right. So, I think that's probably the end. And even if the Cubs do have the DH available, so do 14 other NL teams now. So it's going to be a tough sell.
Yeah. I mean, Evan and I, Cubs fans for a long time, used to go to spring training every year. I loved watching the prospects come up. We used to kind of like, when they got called up, we'd go over to each other's apartments in the city. I remember the Javi Baez game. We stayed up all night, like watching it. And I think he hit a home run in extra innings his first game up. Brennan Davis is that prospect for the Cubs this time around. When do you think we see him getting called up? Do you think any of these new incentives played in the new CBA will speed up his call up? Is he going to be on the squad come middle of the year after All-Star break? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brennan Davis has an excellent shot of playing significant number of innings for the big league Cubs this year. I think it's going to pretty much depend entirely on him. His glove is ready enough. He's probably not a long-term center fielder, but he certainly has a few seasons of runway in him. So he fits so easily into the Cubs big league picture, because for as much as I love the idea of an Ortega and Hermosillo platoon in center, and I'm not even saying that tongue in cheek, I think there's some value to be had there. You easily displace those two guys for someone like Brennan Davis. So he's not being blocked. His glove is good enough for center field, especially a smaller center field like Wrigley. It's going to come down to his bat, and even zeroing that in, it's going to come down to his ability to close the hole in the strike zone. So his whiffs come down. He's got a good eye. He's not having pitch recognition problems. It's more like contact. And it's almost unfair to call them problems. It was his first go around at AAA, and he was one of the youngest players at AA when he was there. So he's well ahead of schedule, and he still produced. He just produced with a high strikeout rate. So I think the Cubs are going to give him a couple of months to see if he can figure out why he's missing some balls in the zone, how big league caliber pitchers like the ones that they do have at AAA are attacking him. and he can sort of, ride that performance right into the big leagues. But it's going to just be down to him after they get past, the first 2 months of the AAA season. I think it's just going to be like, okay, hit your way onto the team, and that'll be it. The new CBA, there are some ways that the outcome that happened with Chris Bryant might not happen with Brendan Davis. But they're probably not going to affect the Cubs' decision with Davis. I mean, he's not coming up in the first 2 weeks, no matter what. And unlike Chris Bryant, it's much more reasonable. Right. It just makes sense. And Chris Bryant, under the new rules, because he won Rookie of the Year, would have been awarded a year of service time. So even in that event, it still wouldn't, the Cubs would have been wiser to bring him up right away, which is, the change that they were hoping for. So no, I just think we'll see him mid-season, and it's going to be up to him after he gets, whatever it is, 150, 200 plate appearances in Iowa.
Yeah. Rookie of the Year, another great movie.
Yes.
What other prospects are you most excited to see get the call besides Brendan Davis? I feel like Davis is a name that a lot of Cubs fans know, but there's some other players that we picked up last year in some of those trades, Bryant and Baez, and Rizzo. Like, who are some of these prospects, and are there any that you think are on the cusp of getting the call, and any that you're super excited for?
So the vast majority of the prospects the Cubs got at the deadline last year are lower level, like high impact guys, which is great. But there is Caleb Killian, and he is going to he's the guy you might remember. He threw a perfect game through 6 innings in the Arizona Fall League Championship last fall. He's a guy that can factor into the Cubs rotation plans sometime in the middle of the season. I put him on a similar schedule to Brendan Davis. I mean, it's based on nothing but just a little bit of experience watching these guys sort of perform. Like Davis, Killian isn't going to be particularly blocked by the rotation. I mean, it's possible that, and it's also likely, I did write about this, that Stroman, Hendricks, and Miley, one of their calling cards, aside from being soft tossing right-handers that get a lot of ground balls, which is the style of pitcher they are, one of their calling cards is their ability to be healthy and make a lot of starts and throw a lot of innings. So, you never count on guys being healthy, but those 3, you mostly expect them to be there most of the year. And beyond them, there actually is a lot of depth. Even after losing Alzolay, there's still Justin Steele, Keegan Thompson, Alec Mills, Stephen Brault, who also is hurt now, but there's options. So Caleb Killian isn't really at the top of the pile. I'm sure the Cubs rather find out if Alec Mills can be a 4th or 5th starter for a while, if Justin Steele or Keegan Thompson actually have the ability to be anything above that. But Killian actually has a little bit more upside and is still very prospecty and could be the type of guy that the Cubs want to ease into the majors through the bullpen, give them multiple innings when they can. Basically the Cardinals' old playbook. And I think he's someone the Cubs got him from the Giants in the Chris Bryant deal. And I think, kind
of the forgotten man, right? I feel like everybody was looking at Alexander Canario as like the big get from that Chris Bryant trade, but his numbers last year, were fantastic at AA, 2.42 ERA, 112 strikeouts, over 100 innings. Like, he's a pretty solid player last year. So that'd be awesome if he'd come up and we get to see, kind of what we got there. All right. So season projections, what do you think this Cubs team's going to win? How many are they going to win? And
perfect season.
Yeah. Perfect season.
So it's funny. I get asked this every year, and every year I go with the optimistic take. For what it's worth, I was always, it was 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20. It was pretty smart to be optimistic. The teams were a lot better than they are now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do it this year. I'm very excited to see a lot of things play out. Seiya and Brendan Davis, chief among them. I mean, they are so crucial to whatever comes next for the Cubs that I would trade a first round playoff exit for them definitely being good long term. It's just the scope of how I've started to follow this team as a fan. It just is more important. So I don't think I can project them for above 500, let's call it 78 wins. And it really is, it's like every year, it's going to be They'll be on pace for more than that or around there, for the first couple months. But the midseason sell-off, which will likely happen, will push them further down the projections as the season goes on. So, yeah, I'm not going to project over 500 unless there's some big moves left that we don't know. Maybe they sign Michael Conforto and trade Contreras for Luis Campusano and some other Padres players that can help out right away. There's some version of this that
Contreras and Guarantee on the Padres reunited in San Diego.
Exactly. But, absent anything crazy like that, I can't do it. Not this year.
Love the optimism.
Like I said, I am brutally attacked for being the optimistic. Like, do the Cubs do anything that bother you? And it's like, yeah, all the time. But, I think there's a big misconception on Twitter and just in sports fandom in general that being pessimistic is the same thing as being smart. And it's not.
Yeah.
It's really easy to say things are going to go wrong or be bad, because when they go right after you said that, nobody remembers. And when they do go wrong, you get to look like a genius. So it's kind of like a win-win, or at least a win, no lose for those guys. And I've never wanted to fan that way. I am a more optimistic guy by nature, and I'm going to find a ton of stuff to be excited about watching the Cubs all year.
Yeah. Genius and optimism reminds me of my favorite movie, Good Will Hunting. All right. That was Michael Cerami. Michael Cerami covers again the Cubs, Bears and Bulls at Bleacher Nation. You can find him on Twitter at Michael_Cerami. That's Cerami. Michael, thanks so much for being here, man. This was awesome.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was a blast.
Thanks, Michael. All right. Thanks again to Michael Cerami for coming on. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Michael_Cerami. All right, Dan. So there has been some other QB news in the NFL this week. We talked last week about all those different signings that were going on. There's even more this week. Couple trades. You got Deshawn Watson going to Cleveland, who still have, as of this recording, Baker Mayfield. So they're gonna have to figure out what they're gonna do with him.
Yeah.
But he's not going to Indianapolis because Matt Ryan is heading over to Indianapolis for a 3rd round pick. I kind of like that pairing right there. I think Matt Ryan's still got some left in the tank. And I think
I was listening to, I think, Dan Patrick this morning, and they were just talking about since 2016, the different week 1 starters for the Colts.
Yeah.
And it's been like Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett. They had what's his name? They had like the Wisconsin quarterback, Tolzien or something like that.
Tolzien, yep. Wentz.
Philip Rivers, Carson Wentz, and now Matt Ryan. Like they just keep throwing darts at the wall. Just like one of these guys got to stick, right?
Yeah, seriously. Deshaun Watson to Cleveland, though. I mean, we'll see how that works out with Amari Cooper now there.
Ridiculous.
And then your boy.
We did our due diligence. Yeah, we checked in on him. The guy's got 22 counts against him right now. Well, innocent until proven guilty, of course, but
yeah.
Don't act like they didn't turn just a complete blind eye to that. Like, this guy can ball. Who cares?
And they gave him a huge contract too, and I think anybody was willing to do that, and it was fully guaranteed. I think this is the first time ever.
NFL.
So, yeah. But
okay, and then my boy,
Marcus Mariota,
gonna crush it.
Yeah,
indoor on turf. I mean, might as well be Oregon. He's gonna crush it.
Yeah. Some other big signings: Lyle Collins, who we talked about on the last show, went to Cincinnati to protect Joe Burrow, and then Teron Armstead went to Miami. I got duped by a fake Rappaport account on Twitter. Okay. They said he was going to the Bears. I'm still upset that that's not actually true.
You weren't the only one, all right?
I know. Olin Kreutz, I heard, got duped too, but Leonard Fournette went back to Tampa. That was the other big signing, I think. It hurts not getting one of those offensive linemen because I feel like we still need, a big name. But we'll see if there's anything else that Poles wants to do this offseason. All right, let's check in on our March Madness brackets.
Yep.
Did you call St. Peter's?
Did not.
The 15 seed?
No, I had Kentucky going to, I think, the Elite Eight. No, Final Four. Oof. Final Four. Oof. I had Kentucky and Auburn in my Final Four. I'm still in first in ours because I got Gonzaga winning it. But yeah, as you were saying, my projected points are not that high.
Yeah, Gonzaga's had a couple of games that you're kind of sweating a little bit on both of those. I think that first one, you look at the final score and you think, all right, the end of that game they blew them out, but
it's
it was close. That
it's
whole
March
game.
Madness, dude. It's
Yeah.
those games don't matter. It's literally out of your memory. You're on to the next one. You can't be thinking like you can't look at their track record of like close games in March Madness because I think like Auburn in the first round blew out the team by 20 something, and then they lost in the second. Like you can't look at that stuff.
Yeah. So you got St. Peter's 15 seed. That's a Cinderella story to watch at this point.
Love it.
Iowa State, I think we said was still in it too. They're in 11. So that's
they won
cool.
2 games last year.
Who did?
Iowa State.
Really?
It's one of the biggest turnarounds like of all time. They won 2 games last year with a new coach. Second year, he brings them back to the tournament, and now they're going to the Sweet 16. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. We'll update you again next week. I have Arizona. Dan's got Gonzaga. So, Dan, do you have a would you rather for us?
I do, but you're a dad, so I don't know how much this is going to be a difficult decision for you. Would you rather for the rest of your life have to wake up at 4 a.m. every single day or go to bed at 8 p.m. every single day?
I think I'd rather wake up early because I do that quite often now.
Yeah, right. So after I wrote, I was like, he's a dad. It's like, it's really not going to.
Yeah, I was up in the middle of the
affect
night
you
for
much.
a couple hours last night, but yeah. What about you? Do you got an answer to that one?
I'd go early too.
Okay.
Everyone always like, I gotta start waking up early. Gotta seize the day. So
Early bird
only
gets
so
the
many
worm.
hours. Only so many hours. Start waking up earlier.
Kaplan says he wakes up at 3:45 a.m. every day. So there you go. That's how you get your day started.
All right, you got a fact for us?
Yeah, I got a few. So we've been talking Cubs all episode. Got some interesting 2021 Cubs facts, courtesy of Al Yellen of SB Nation. These are not going to be good, obviously. This is 2021 Cubs. Last year, they were 6-29 against the White Sox, Brewers, Giants, and Royals. Against everyone else, 65-62. So winning
Not
record
bad.
against everyone except for those 4 teams. We just got dominated by the Sox, the Brewers, the Giants, and the Royals. Javi Baez led the team in steals with 13, despite only playing 4 months with the team.
There you go.
So not a lot of speed on base pass outside of Javi. They also broke the MLB record for strikeouts in a season with 1,596. Not good. Ian Happ led the team with 66 RBIs. That's the lowest total to lead the Cubs since the dead ball era. So I guess part of my fast fact here is going to be what is the dead ball era? Because I feel like, you hear that term, who knows what that is, right? The dead ball era is generally considered to have lasted from 1900 to 1920. As the name suggests, the game used a dead ball. That's like a softer ball to play the game. And it was just one ball used for the entire game. Ballparks were bigger and teams averaged only 3 runs a game. So there you go. That's what.
So now we're in the we're in the live ball era.
It's the live ball era from 1920 to current. Yeah. So that's our show. Thanks again to our guest, Michael Cerami, for joining us today. For Dan Slook, I'm Evan Bierman. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com. And you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft and drop us a sub. Thanks again for listening.
Cheers.